not a completely private in the sense of a private corporation.
Okay.
But it's closer to that than it is to a government agency. Actually, it's a hybrid organization. It has a little bit of a private corporation quality and a little bit of public agency quality, but it's neither of them. It's a hybrid, and what it really is a partnership. It's a traditional partnership between politicians and bankers.
Like a private-public partnership? Almost?
That's a good analogy. Yes, I would say so. And that's a good analogy. And but the thing is, it's not really subject to the will of the people. If you noticed in the hearings that we see on television lately, sometimes the chairman of the Federal Reserve would go sit there, and he's being grilled by various congressmen, and it looks like the congressmen are really in control because they're asking the questions, and the Federal Reserve chairman is sitting there squirming a little bit and giving answers. But if you listen carefully to the exchange, you realize that the Federal Reserve chairman doesn't give a hoot about these guys. There was one very famous exchange that happened, I think it was last year.
I saw it.
Yeah, Mr. Bernanke.
Yeah, Bernanke, and he was asked, where did the $700 billion go in? He said in credit default swaps, and they said, to whom? He goes, I can't discuss that with you.
I can't tell you that. He said, well, what do you mean you can't? No, it's just, no. I can't answer your question, and I'm not going to tell you who got the money. Well, there it was. If you're just listening to what's going on, the Federal Reserve System does not have to answer to Congress or anybody else. And people would say, well, the president appoints the Fed chairman, doesn't he? Well, does he? That's a good question. When you really look at what happens, do you suppose that the guy that's elected president ever selects the Federal Reserve chairman from a list of names of people he already knows? No, they never know these people. They select the chairman from a list that's provided to them by the banking committee or, more importantly, by the donors to their campaign. You know, when a person gets the endorsement of the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, they don't just walk in and say, well, gee, thanks a lot, fellas. You know, there's a negotiation that goes on. They say, look, Mr. Brown, we like what you're doing here. We don't agree with everything that you're doing, but we like your basic policies, and we're thinking that we may throw our support behind you, and if we do that, you know, we can probably make you president. Now, if we do that, would you be willing to agree that we can appoint or give you the names, and you make the appointment from the list we provide of the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve System? And Mr. Brown says, that's a no-brainer, sure. So actually, you see, the president does not appoint these people.
Right. I think that a lot of us get that now.
Yeah, these people appoint the president. It's the other way around.
I remember watching Greenspan in an interview where he said, we're not answerable to anybody. Right there. There was no hiding it. There was no shame about it. It was right out there.
Oh, no, they play it as a virtue. They say that, you see, we're above politics, they say. Well, which is true. They are above politics, but that doesn't mean that they're pure. Being above politics, they can still be the mafia. They're above politics.
I want to read you something in your book on 218 on the Rothschild dynasty, which is a mind-blowing statement, and it's by Mayer Amschel Rothschild, who's quoted as saying, "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws." Biographer Frederick Morton concluded that the Rothschild dynasty had conquered the world more thoroughly, more cunningly, and much more lastingly than all of the Caesars before or all the Hitlers after them. If that isn't profound.
Well, that is profound, and that is just exactly how profound this topic is. People do not realize the importance of money. They think in terms only of their own little lives, you know, boy, what I could do if I had more money. And they keep thinking in terms of buying, you know, bigger cars and better homes and more clothes and taking trips, and it's all consumption, consumption, consumption. What they don't realize that is on the world stage, the international financiers are looking at control over nations and over the world.
All activities. Can we discuss Cecil Rhodes for a minute? I want to discuss a couple of the players that have really determined the landscape, the mechanisms, and the conditions that we're living in today, actually. And I was wondering if you could talk about Cecil Rhodes, his 19th century fortunes, and what came out of his work.
Well, you hit right to the core of some very important issues here, Kim.
Thank you.
Well, you do.
We're at the jugular.
You do.
We're at the central nervous system here.
Yeah. Well, now, see, what we're talking about here is very controversial because you cannot talk about this without using the word conspiracy, and that causes a knee-jerk reaction.
I'm not worried. Let it roll. It's okay.
But some of your listeners might say, oh, there's another conspiracy theorist talking about this and so forth. Well, actually, what I have prepared a talk, which I've given a couple of times, and one of these days I think I'll probably release it on video. But anyway, the title of the talk is A Conspiratorial View of History as Explained by the Conspirators Themselves. And the point of that is that when we speak of conspiracy, if we just restrict ourselves to what the conspirators say, and if they call it a conspiracy, and if they explain how they're going to do it, well, then, what can you say? Is that a theory anymore? No, it's not a theory. It's a conspiracy history. And that's what we're really talking about. And so getting to your question, people know the name Cecil Rhodes, probably more in Europe than they do here in the U.S., but Cecil Rhodes was the former commissioner of South Africa, one of the wealthiest men in the world. This was at the turn of the last century. He had acquired control over most of South Africa's mineral reserves, the diamond mines and the gold and everything, and amassed a huge fortune, probably one of the greatest fortunes the world has ever seen, even including today. Okay, that's historic fact. That's not theory. And but what they don't know is that when he died, and he wrote a series of wills, I think there were 7 altogether, the bulk, not the bulk, the totality of his fortune did not go to his family. It went to create a secret society, as he called it, a secret society.
He actually called it that?
Yeah, he had called it that, and he spoke of its virtues. In fact, again, this is as described by the conspirators themselves. Cecil Rhodes said in a paper that was later published, it was sitting in the library in London, a British library for quite a few years, but it was in his own handwriting, and he spoke about his affiliation with the Masonic lodges, and he said, it's a great wonder to me how people, the Masons that he was talking about, have so much power and influence in society, and they have all these rituals and all this secrecy. And he said, it doesn't seem to make any point. What are they wasting their time going through all these motions for when there's no object to it? There's no goal for it. He said, why don't we really put a goal behind this? Why don't we adopt the same secrecy and the same type of organization? And why don't we put some teeth in it, and we'll create an organization that will literally conquer the world in secret? Well, he said that. And of course, he described it not as bluntly as I just did. He said, what we will do is spread the culture and government and command of the British Empire. He said, we have the greatest society, the greatest culture, the greatest level of education that the world has ever seen, and all these people of the world will benefit if we control them. It's for their good that we must do this, he said. So whether they like it or want it or not, it's really for their good. It's noblesse noblesse. We have to do this, and somebody has to do it, so it's us. And therefore, let's create a secret organization, and we'll conquer in this way, quietly, not with armies, but we'll just take over the governments, we'll take over the financial systems, we'll control the media, we'll control the educational system. I mean, this is all spelled out. This is not me speaking. These are the people that actually carried it out, writing about these things. And how do we know? Well, from their own documents. They're now right in the public record. You're not going to see any of them on CNN or find anything like this in the textbooks in our schools, because our schools are run by the very organization that Cecil Rhodes created. And how do we know this? Well, speaking of his will, there was a guy by the name of William Stead, who was the executor of the Cecil Rhodes estate. He's the guy that executed the wills, and he wrote a book on the wills. It's not exactly a bestseller, but you can get it.
Really?
Yeah, And he describes all these things. He said